Are you unsure whether to pivot your career or start a business after experiencing a toxic job or an unexpected layoff? If so, you're in the right place. My name is Marissa Price. I am the co founder of the Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women coming up online May 1st through the 3rd. And tonight I have a wonderful guest with me, Mercedes Swan, one of our incredible summit speakers. And she'll be talking to us about how you even begin to decide if you are in this situation, right? A lot of us feel like entrepreneurship, and it can be the path after you've experienced a toxic job. But what if you want to make a pivot in your career? What if you want to have something in between, do a little bit of both, knowing that that is your right to do so? And so, with that, I will pass it over to Mercedes to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work.
Thank you, Marissa. I'm so excited to
Absolutely.
be here with this audience. I know I am in good company in such a warm space. So I'm really excited for this. I've been excited for a little bit. And I'm excited to, be going to the summit and just being with some truly powerful Black women. So thank you for allowing me to be part of that experience as a speaker as well. So my name is Mercedes. I'm the founder of Career Love, which is a social impact organization. We have lots of big visions and dreams, which we'll be talking about. But as we really move forward in this space, particularly, I view myself as a career and business coach for Black women, as you mentioned. I really base my coaching practices based on my own journey and what I've learned, and so. Just a little bit of a career highlight. I started off my career in human resources. I actually started off with a love of psychology, and that led me into IO psychology, and that led me to find HR. That's kind of probably the weirdest way to find HR, but that's how I found it. And then I chose, it became like my passion, what I really wanted to do, and just truly fell in love with HR. I know people are always like, what, you fell in love with HR? Yes, I love HR. Okay. And then as I went through the journey, I actually made a career pivot to work in DEI. So I did that for about a year and some change full time in a DEI role until I decided to exit full time in my business. So I'm a little, a year and a half into this transition of being able to do this by myself. The ultimate, I feel, liberation and how I get to show up and what I get to do. And so I'm happy to be able to share those lessons and how I've grown and what I've learned for myself, as well as working with literally thousands of other Black women through their pivots and transitions and gaining clarity in that process. So happy to be here, happy to share my story, and that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love that you said like you have a love for human resources. I think that's one of the areas that can be kind of, I don't know, like opaque is the word that's coming to me when it comes to being in a toxic job, not really understanding like the behind the scenes processes of human resources. So the fact that you have that like skill set that you're able to like contribute to your
Mhm.
clients, I think that's amazing too. I want to ask, what led you to support Black women in designing their next chapter? As you've shared a little bit about your journey, if you want to tell us that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like, it's really interesting because it does intersect with my HR background, right? So
Mm.
for women, we'll get into it, right? But like your business and your career path is not always going to look linear and you're not always going to know where it is going, but just go for the process, just go through the process, right?
Yeah.
And so that was me. The start of my At the start of my career in my business, I was a Black woman who was the only Black woman in that organization, the corporate space, right? Of course, there were some out in, sites or whatnot, but I was really the only Black woman, and for actually a while, the only minority in
Mm.
that space. And, I went into that space as an intern, right? That actually had to learn how to navigate these spaces and had family members who had not navigated corporate spaces, right? And so much of this, I was kind of alone. And so I had learned, taken all of this skill set and knowledge and education, and was really honestly like doing my thing in HR, right? This organization and learning. And we actually finally got approved to hire another HR person to like work with me. And a Black woman came through the door. Okay. And I was so
Uh-huh.
excited. I was like, oh my gosh, she's amazing on paper. This is going to be great. I'm not going to be the only Black woman here. I'm not going to be the only anything here.
Hmm.
And I was so excited. And I had a phone screen with her, and I was like, she's going to be a great fit. And she came to the interview where we had the rest of the executive team, of course, all white males. and she bombed
Mhm.
that interview. I mean, it was awful. And it
Mm.
was like almost
Mhm.
a 180 from the interview that I had with her, where I was just like, oh, this is
Mhm.
a sure fit. And so that story is actually what led me to create my coaching business. Now, I can't say that it was like a direct correlation, but that experience led me to really truly understand that the skill sets and the things I just see as a given because I'm in HR, because I was in psychology, and because I went to business school was not available to other Black women in the way that I understood it. Right. And so I was like, well, I didn't have family that worked in a corporate space and I'm the only Black woman, but there were certain structures that I understood based on like my role in HR, right, that others didn't. And so that story in combination with my experience in that and wanting to be able to leverage those HR skills is what actually resulted in me launching my business at the time, which was called HR for Millennials, where I was like wanting to share those guidance with people
Interesting.
my
Mhm.
age, right? And
Mhm.
so the reckoning of 2020 happened, and I decided that I only wanted to work with Black people. And then as I kept going, I was like, I'm only working with Black women. Y'all are stressing me out. Okay. Like, and Black women have been there the entire time. I would say it has been 90% of my client base from the beginning. And so it just for me was natural to really lean in and to support Black women in this space as a career coach. And then as I kind of grew and started growing my business and feeling more confident and comfortable with sharing the lessons that I've learned and grown as a business owner, I began sharing that with clients and became a business coach as well. So that's a little bit about my journey. And so I love to think about it as this full circle where the launch of my business really started with a talented Black woman. And that is where it is today. Yeah. So that's
Oh,
what I do.
wow. That's a really great story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And just like similar things in my background. So I was in corporate spaces too, right? First generation college student trying to navigate all these like different dynamics. No one like really prepared me for what I was going to
Mhm.
encounter in these corporate spaces. And so the fact that you are a coach now, right? Helping Black women
Yeah.
navigate some of these different dynamics. It's so needed, right? So I just want to say that. So like, thank you. Thank you for the
Thank
work that
you.
yeah, of
Likewise.
course,
It's
of
so
course.
needed. Yeah.
I want to ask you, your summit session focuses on choosing between entrepreneurship and making a career pivot, something Dr. Kamani and I, my summit co-founders, see a lot in speaking with Black women who are in toxic jobs, kind of like navigating, like, do I pursue entrepreneurship? Do I make a career pivot? Do I do something in between?
Yeah.
And so just want to ask why this conversation is really important right now, given what we're experiencing of being pushed out of the workforce really in such huge numbers. Anything that you want to share about that?
Yeah, I would say my biggest flex right now, I'm just messing with y'all, like it, but it is a little bit, is that even though we're talking about it now, I was thinking about a lot of this in 2024. I actually made like a recap video about this because I saw the writing on the wall, like as we were going into that presidential election. And that's actually when I started talking about a lot of these things because as a person who was working in DEI at the time, I knew that it would mean that like these systems and these structures that we had been fighting for to provide us greater opportunities for equity, right, in the workplace, were going to kind of disintegrate, right? We have normalized a new thing in our country, which we had normalized it in some ways before, but it was truly more normalized and accepted because we knew exactly what, unfortunately, the not 92% opted into,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
so at that point, my thoughts really became, okay, we're not going to be able to rely on these systems because the support isn't going to be there, right? So what does that look like for the Black community to continue to grow, for Black women in the women that I serve to be able to have options in that? And I see that ultimately as business, right? There's nothing that can free us to make our own decisions and live authentically than we can when we have a business or a side hustle. It doesn't mean that you have to do that full time or that even you have to always be active in that, but knowing immediately like when there is job loss or where there's something that you do need to,
mhm,
increase income for, whatever it is, that you know how to leverage those skills like outside of the workforce, right? And that doesn't always look like a business, right? That could look like knowing how to quickly get contract work or freelance worker or like launching that business, right? And
mhm.
so at that time, that's actually when I began to restructure my community, which is the Black Women Bliss community, and start putting in more career resources and business resources into that. And I actually refreshed all of that in 2025. So when we say that this is a thing that's happening now, I think we're seeing the full fallout of it now, right? And it feels like it's something that is very much here right now because we've seen all the job loss. But I think that this is something that was always coming, and that I think many Black women had actually started thinking about this. And that's what really pushed me to make sure I had all these resources available, is that my clients were asking about this actually in 2023. So I say all of that to say that this is a trend, and it's more of a topic that is at the forefront now because so many of us it's the only option, right? We've been out of work for 6 months,
Mhm.
a year, several years, and so it's like, well, if I'm going to spend all this time and effort looking for a job and not to have any opportunity because of the market and because of discrimination, and even if after I get it I might be in this job market that or this job that doesn't value me and it's toxic and all these other things, and I might as well do the hard thing and launch the business myself, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's why it's coming to a head. It's more prevalent in the conversations that we've had. But if we're being honest here, in terms of Black women exiting the workforce from their own volition or being pushed out, I think we've seen this for a long time coming, kind of thing. Yeah, that's my take
Mhm.
on it.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, like the workforce, like the work world has like shifted so dramatically. But as you said, there were signs, right? And I
Mhm.
love what you said about having something like, even if you're not going to put your full energy into it, knowing that you have like this thing that you've built on the side that you can turn to, right? To freelance, to get clients on your own. If you do
Mhm.
happen to experience a layoff or being pushed out of the workforce, right? I think that's so important. Can you talk a little bit about how to, I guess, like decide where your energy should go? If you're
Mm.
deciding between entrepreneurship, freelancing, or making a career pivot, as you said, like applying to jobs, especially now with so many
Mhm.
steps, right, that they take us through. It can be an extended process, and then trying to like have enough energy to build a business. Like I guess, any tips that you can share on how to best allocate your energy between the two if you're still kind of deciding.
Yeah, I think there's gonna be so much of that that is wound up in, our current state, right? Because right. I'm in a much different perspective when I'm maybe at an earlier part in my career. So based on my own journey, I can kind of talk about it from that perspective, right? So earlier on in my career, right, I had to make sure that I was showing up and putting the right type of energy in professional development and relationship management, the things that we often take from work with us and we think about after hours, right? And there was
Mhm.
a lot more career management, I guess, in what I needed to manage from a day to day at the beginning of my career. Like, let's say when I was an intern, a coordinator, and before I moved into management, right? And so, because of that, my business absolutely suffered, even though I had started it around that same time. Also, I just didn't have a lot of the understanding of how business systems work at the time. I think there's much more access to information right now, but I think when I started, it was much less, and a lot more of the Black women in leadership and or who had started businesses and their leadership. I don't think I saw all of that as I was building this. So I would say that there was a lot less resources and there was more focus that I had to put into my job to really understand or to really have enough time to work on that outside of work, right? So early career. And I'm not saying that early career means that. I just mean that it's that connection between energy, right? So then,
Mhm.
as I moved into a management level role, I unfortunately worked for the most toxic supervisor I've ever worked for. It was
Mm.
a
Mhm.
challenging time. I went into depression. I had anxiety. I got an adult ADHD diagnosis, which kind of really shifted a lot of things in terms of how I understood myself. And so it was a really challenging time. And so my business almost like had a halt, right? And
Mhm.
at that time, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm done with the workplace. I don't care if I've moved into management. I still care about doing a good job, but I'm not going to really invest this type of energy into work at this point, right? And so I actually have this experience of me like fully flipping a switch on what I cared about, right? And I didn't
Mhm.
really care about long-term progression or growth at the organization that I was in, right? There were opportunities that I looked at that I was like, I don't really want that because I know that's going to take more energy from me when I want to be putting energy in this bucket, which was growing my business. And during that time, I was also navigating a job search because the job was so toxic, okay, that I was having mental breakdowns like every couple
Wow.
days. And so I couldn't come home and work on the business. So I said, oh my gosh, I've got to launch the job search. I've just got to get out of here. And that's when I launched my job search to move into DEI at an organization that was going to allow me to work fully remote, that had a much more relaxed culture. It was in the nonprofit space, which I know sometimes, ladies, I know sometimes we gotta pick the right ones, okay?
Mhm,
So I know sometimes
mhm,
that can be a challenge, but I moved into that organization, into a role that was going to provide me much more space and time for me, and where I wasn't taking so much of that energy outside of work, outside of the my 9 to 5, so to speak. And that is when everything shifted in my business, because I had space and time to be clear. The first month, so couple, and I was kind of trending that way. But as I was really rounding out my first year, which half of that year I was at that organization, that was my first profitable month in business, because I was able to really shut off those energies, almost like kind of create a separation. But I was
mhm.
so much enjoying the work that that energy really came out of the work that I was doing in my 9 to 5 and energized me after work, right? And so that really allowed me to really get done the work that I needed to in the business and kind of be able to detach. Now things shifted in my organization, right? We talk about the pet the thread. Okay, I know I do. And so there's a lot
Mm,
of things
mhm,
shifted. And so that's
mhm.
what resulted in my exit and wanting to kind of do it full time. But that space and time that that year and a half really provided me gave me what I needed to really focus in on my business. And so I know that's like a really long story and like a very convoluted answer, but I say that because there is a lot to think about in terms of your energy and where it's going and how that contributes, right? That's with me having a job, right? That's with me having the stability of that. And so that's where kind of the sliding scales of understanding where your energy is going. But the part about that is that when I was in those environments where my energy was going and much more prioritized into the workplace, it was much harder for me to build my business. It's when I had a connection between the two and I was able to flow and have kind of like a flow state or enjoy in both of those spaces,
Mm.
I was able to have more success in that. And I would say, in terms of Black women who are laid off, I want to say that I have not been in that situation myself of having been laid off. You know, I have been in this space of like
Mhm.
deciding I want to exit and really figuring out like what that means in terms of paying bills and what you need to make and revenue and all of those things. But I made a decision with a big cushion that I had made a roadmap and a timeline for. If you are a Black woman who has been dealing with layoffs, I think it's an important thing to consider in terms of market opportunity, right? And so where you're currently looking, if you're looking for work, if you've applied to hundreds of jobs, if you know you've tailored your resume, if you know you're doing everything that you can to really align yourself with the job market, and you know you've taken your best bet, like you've taken your best shot at it, and you are not seeing opportunities in the market, then that might be an opportunity where you truly need to say, hey, maybe I need to reconsider this. Maybe I need to consider my brand more holistically and think about how I can think about myself more as a business. It doesn't mean that you're launching the business, but how can I think about how my services can get out there, right? Which might mean I'm looking for contract work. I'm reaching out to see if there are opportunities with leaders I know, right? For opportunities for for working with them for part-time contract roles, freelance roles, those types of things. But also, yeah, I mean, if you're not doing it, if you don't get the job, like go ahead and launch the business and start getting those things out there and those services out there, because you don't know what could happen, right? Some things can change overnight. And so, you know, if you're in a layoff and you're not like, hey, I wasn't planning on launching the business, all of those things, then it might mean you're kind of having your feet in both, stages, so you don't completely leave yourself from the job market, because that stability is nice, but you kind of want to see like, is your energy and your return on investment in terms of your energy and where it's going. If you're laid off, you might want to think about the best way to allocate that energy based on what you're seeing in the job market and what that might mean if that was displaced into fighting business opportunities. Yeah, I know that's
Wow.
a lot.
Thank you. No, that was so
Yeah.
good. Thank you so much for that. And I love that you mentioned like the energy when you're in a toxic job and
Mhm.
trying to build a business. That's completely different than being in a job that supports you, kind of like funding your business. When you feel
Absolutely.
supported in the 9 to 5 and you're not battling like toxicity, every day, because
Mhm.
that can drain your energy. And so to like, the word grace is coming up for me, right? If
Mm.
you're in a toxic job right now, and trying to build a business, right, you're dealing with workplace trauma, which takes a huge toll on our minds, bodies, and spirits. And so giving yourself that level of grace, that may be why it's more difficult for you to find the energy to pour into entrepreneurship, versus
Mhm.
having a 9 to 5 that really feels supportive. Like you said, being in that flow state. I think that's a
Yeah,
really great way to put it. Like, your creativity, it sounds like you were able to access
yeah,
that and pour it into your business because you were in that supportive environment versus the one that was draining your energy, right? Hmm.
100%. Yeah.
Hmm. Ecom, yes, says, yep, I agree with
Mm.
the energy angle. And one thing I found challenging trying to manage working a 9 to 5 and starting a business. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Thank you
challenging.
for that.
Yeah.
It is. It is. I want to ask, after a toxic job or unexpected layoff, the pressure that we are often under to figure things out quickly,
Mhm.
right? Once we may notice, oh, this workplace is harming me, I need to pivot into something else, and kind of having like this urgency placed on us. Anything that you can share around how to come from a place of clarity, if you're able to, in alignment, versus the urgency and just taking whatever you see is next, and allowing yourself that space to ask. Because I'll have that word agency written down too, because I noticed that when you were
Yeah.
speaking, like, I want to do this. This is where my energy is going, right? This is the
Mhm.
bucket that I determine where my energy is going. So anything you want to share around clarity instead of that
Yeah.
sense of urgency and pressure that we may feel?
So I really love this question because I actually think that urgency and quickness, particularly in business, is a good thing for us. And I think that for career, we're often taught not to do that, right? Because you make mistakes, there's risk, right? And we're penalized for those things in the workplace, right? But the only thing that we're penalized in a business is what we choose to do, right? Ourselves and what we're doing. And so I think that a lot of times we probably should be actually embrace the agility more than we do, particularly when it comes to building a business. I think the defining piece about that agility is not actually the speed in which you take it, but rather the alignment of the decision, right? And so with Black Woman Bliss, and so let me explain that. So Black Woman Bliss is a persona that I created for myself, but it is
Mhm.
also the foundation of what I do with Black women, right? It's because we all have our own version of what that is, right? And so I created a persona for myself that said, hey, the highest version of myself, the Mercedes that has everything that she wants, that is living her best dream life out on a beach, okay? What would she do to make this life happen? What actions would she take? What would she believe about herself, right? And so that meant that I was able to make aligned decisions because I understood where I was going. I didn't have everything figured out, but I understood, hey, this is what Mercedes in this, like if I take myself out of it, the Mercedes that is living this life would make this decision. So therefore, that is a decision that's going to be in best alignment with me, right? That's probably not going and being the martyr in the workplace because I don't want to be in the workplace. That's probably not going to argue with our palm colored folks at work about DEI in this space because I actually want to divest from those conversations holistically. What I actually want to do right now is be teaching Black women about the tools and the resources that we need right now. So the most aligned decision for me is to make the exit, right? And so sometimes we are actually making a risky, quick decision that's in most alignment. And sometimes we're making a slow, mindful, thoughtful decision that's actually based in like lack and things that are not in alignment for us and what we want. And so I tend to think about it to say, hey, every decision that you make, do you kind of have something that you're holding yourself to accountability wise for your vision for what you want from your life, from in my case my Black woman bliss persona and what I want to see from the highest version of myself and the life that she lives. So if the decision is quick and it's alignment, then maybe it's an okay decision, but I do agree that there's time needed to sit with it. Sometimes we do need to sit with it. I had lots of quiet sitting time last year, so sometimes we do need that, but sometimes we're ready to make the action and we just don't because we, yeah,
That's a
we're out
really
of
great
alignment.
point. That's a really great point. Yeah. And as an entrepreneur, as you were saying that, I've been thinking about agility, the term you mentioned,
Uh-huh.
having to put stuff out there, right? And just see how it lands. Because we can get stuck in kind of like the perfectionist mode. I just had a
Mhm.
conversation with Glamazini on her channel yesterday about the fear of visibility that keeps a lot of us from launching our offers out into the world. And so there
Yeah.
is a balance between like the speed, right, to get the feedback as an entrepreneur and thinking of that in a different way sometimes when you're in a job or a career,
Yeah.
and taking that like silence, as you said, to sit with and determine, is this a path that I want to go on? Do I want to try something else? And just giving yourself that space to breathe, right, can be really helpful
Mhm.
too. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. um, I want to ask, if someone is saying, asking themselves, should I start a business or get another job? Anything that you help your clients walk through when
Mm.
making that decision, and knowing that there are in betweens too. So it doesn't have to be firmly 100% full time entrepreneurship or only in a career. You can do a mixture of both and allow yourself that flexibility. But any way that you help your clients kind of decide between the two.
Yes. So a big part of that initial conversation does come from that energy conversation. So I think for some of us, like we are putting the energy into work because that's what we believe we should be doing and we don't need to be doing it, right? We have a job where it could actually be cushy. We could kind of, back away slowly from the projects that we're taking on. We can stop fighting the fights that were not for us. We have organizations that don't want to make change, but we're the only one trying to make change and we're saving everything for everybody, right? So those are some of those pieces in that space where actually you might not need to leave that job. You need to set boundaries with yourself about how you use your energy in that job and allow it to be the cushion for you. I was not in, so my last job, I was in that space, right? Where I was like, girl, do not take on all these projects. I took on a lot of projects still because I was like, oh, my 50% is is a lot still. Actually, when I noticed it, I was taking no work home and whatever else and enjoying my
Mhm.
lunch breaks fully and all the things. But I still had so much energy because I had set that boundary. And that was very
Mhm.
different from all of the other roles that I had where I was not able to provide myself that space and energy after work. So sometimes for Black women, we really need to understand what we're causing for ourselves in these situations and what can we actually leave behind or disconnect from or release, detach from, that we are carrying, that if we did that, we would allow ourselves much more time, space, and energy for business if that's what we really want. I also think that there is considerations for what you want out of this, right? So is it really that, like, for instance, in my Black Woman Bliss era, is it truly that I would have the business, right? Is the life that I want to live truly compatible with that? Not everybody enjoys waking up and having to figure out what they're doing each day, which I get that whole, like, not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur kind of like thought process. I agree with that. Like it's not easy, right? And so I think it's a piece of like, where's your energy going? And how can you separate that? And is this really in alignment with what you ideally want in life, right? Are the things and the tasks that you would need to accomplish each day to have a business or to move in your career um compatible, right? And so if you can think through those things and kind of have clarity about what that means for you, then you can then decide on the other things, which are things like market, right? Like again, if you know you're in a toxic job and that's not going to give you the ability to have energy after work, right? Then you're probably going to need to pivot, right? You're going to need to pivot first.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah.
the market is hard, and so you really need to take a hard look at saying like, hey, how can I try and make this work or not work, right? Because I don't want to like exclude the market, right? Sometimes we have business goals that are not like a, hey, I can launch this in 90 days kind of thing, which anyway, I hope we have some time to talk about like, hey, there's businesses that are easily launchable. And then there's businesses that, take more time and development and growth, right? And so you have to think about your roadmap in that, whether that's financial, your time capacity, your priorities, the financial investment into some of those things. So those are some sliding scales. But in terms of you being able to launch and it supporting your ideal life, like are there things within that capabilities and the capacity for you that allow you to quickly move into launching that business or focusing on that business and actually generating revenue, which aren't always the same things. So I guess to put it briefly in summary, right? Like your energy, where's it's going, and whether you can detach from the job that you're in or not, energy wise, if you aren't trying to exit, right? If you are trying to exit, making sure that you have that financial path set for you in terms of your revenue and in terms of your savings and things like that, they're going to help that pivot be easier for you. Your capacity for the work, right? Leading the business, making sure that it's something that you want, having capacity to actually work on it, and then understanding what's going on in the market in terms of your job search to make a pivot or to say, hey, I mean, there's business market too, and understanding what your market is, but that's another piece. So I think those are the big pieces and considering that. And I always start with, like I said, are you in a space where you can reasonably um, dedicate the time and energy that you need to that business and like going from there? Yeah.
Thank you so
Mhm.
much for that. And I love that you mentioned you might have to do a career pivot first
Yeah.
and then like use that, right? Use your job as an investor sometimes in your business, but it has to be more of a flexible strategy. I think we've been taught to look at this very rigidly. Like it has to be
Mm,
this, it has to be this way. Kind of like letting yourself be flexible, right? You may have to get a job in between to fund your business, like you said, depending on the type of business that you want to launch, and allowing yourself that freedom and flexibility to explore the options that you have versus feeling like you have
mm,
to immediately commit to something, right?
yeah.
Because even if you decide to do entrepreneurship, as you said too, it's not for everyone. It's absolutely
Mhm.
not. Being an entrepreneur for the past 3 years, um, but if you do want to explore it, like giving yourself that freedom and knowing that it may look differently than you thought it was going
Yes.
to look at first, right? I think that's so important.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'd say
Wonderful.
probably it's most likely gonna look different than what you thought, right?
Yes.
A
Uh-huh.
lot. Yeah.
Mhm. And you mentioned boundaries. I want to ask about that too, because a
Mm,
lot of these the things that we do, the extracurriculars that we do at work, they're often
mm.
attached to some type of like worth validation that we're seeking. Any advice that you can offer if someone is having difficulty setting boundaries that could allow them to have more energy, as you said, to pour into their business or do something on the side because they're
Mhm.
expending so much of their energy in a job, maybe doing extra things above their job responsibilities. Any tips that you can share, I guess?
Yeah, my experience is what you've shared, right? Being wrapped up in, I think, the identity of that, right? And what you should or should not be doing in those spaces. And so I can absolutely say that for me, when I was trying, what made me knew know I had to leave is that there were no amount of boundaries that I was going to set into place to actually manage the supervisor that I had at the time, right? There were things that I could do that were protective to me, but I had to recognize that like I'm not going to fix an individual. The boundary that I did set is that I'm not going to prove myself to anyone anymore. So I stopped proving myself to my teams and teams, my team in the way that I thought I had to. I'm not going to prove myself to my supervisor. I'm not going to prove myself to the other man because I was in HR, right? So the other leaders that I consulted to, like just knowing that the work that I was doing in myself, I just am, and I know that I do great work, and that is it, right? So all of the extracurriculars, the management, the hyper vigilance, the other challenges that I have were based on this idea that I had to prove myself and I had to be right in all of these situations. And the problem of why that boundary, I say the problem at hand, really, and the reason why that boundary was so powerful for me is because I had a supervisor that would not have ever said that I proved myself, right? So the expectation and the validation wasn't going to be there, and I was somebody that really needed that validation. So I say this to say all of that, that I think boundaries really, if you're having troubles figuring out what those boundaries are, you have to listen to what's actually triggering you in that moment and ask yourself, what would you have rather experienced instead? Right? So if I went to work and I went in and I was upset. Like I would have my supervisor like call me all the time and just like ramble off, like, well, why didn't we do this? And it's like, that's what you told us to do. Like that's actually not what I would have recommended, but that's what you told me to do. And so I like get on the phone and I'm like very frustrated because that's not what I did. Right. And so in those moments, I had a desire to like have to prove myself. Like, no, I told you this and like this is that. And like I like defend myself and like figure all these things out and make sure this issue or the discrepancy never happened again. And after I made that commitment to myself, it would just be, oh, well, you can check our one-on-one that was decided on what day during our meeting. Let me know if you have other questions. I'm not getting riled up. I'm not going to go overperform for an issue that my supervisor caused. I'm firm in myself and my understanding of the situation and the energy exchange at that point, because I set the boundary of I'm no longer going to prove myself, jump over hoops to do that, was something that gave me those spaces. So I think there's a lot of different boundaries that we could have, and we're all different. So we all need different boundaries, but really understanding the basis of why we're triggered and setting up something that's going to provide us some insulation is going to be helpful, because boundaries are what we do. So we can't control what, in this case, my supervisor did. And so I was like, I can't, she's still going to do all the stuff that she does. So I'm just going to get out of there. But I can give myself a little bit of peace in how I move and how I react. Yeah.
That's such good advice. Thank you. To have, as you said, that firm like sense of self, right?
Yeah.
And once you like establish that, you're able to do these things much more easily. It comes like almost effortlessly when you like know who you are, and you're, I guess, like healing from seeking that external validation, as we have been socialized to do. So there's no like shame, blame in that. It's often like really deep wiring that you have to rewire and like tell yourself like, no, I am worthy. I am valid, right? Even if no one else external is providing that to me in a toxic work environment. Having that firm rooting within yourself can change so much and allow you to create those boundaries around your energy. Absolutely.
Great.
I'll read a comment here. Thorough Mickey Ray. I recently started my workflow optimization business. The fear of being seen is so real. Everything has to be perfect before networking. And are they judging my skills? And maybe I should just get a job. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you so much. I know so many people can relate to this. Mercedes, anything that you want to share around the fear of being seen as an entrepreneur, of putting your offers out into the world and having to receive the feedback from people? That can be the scariest things about entrepreneurship, but anything that you want to share?
I feel like we have this conversation, like I have this conversation all the time. And like my honest thought is just like, do it scared, like set the goal, say what you're going to do, and like just get it out there, because ruminating on what people think, like you could put the most perfect thing out in the world and people will disagree with you and people will hate it. And it has nothing to do with your work ethic, the ability for you to sell that offer, or other things. And so I think for me, I had to detach from feeling that sense of perfection in whatever I've done. And it still comes up. I'm not going to say that that's never a thing that happens. Like anytime I do that when I'm creating a piece of content where I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's right. But it's like, okay, I'm knowledgeable, right? I know the dynamics, particularly for me, right? When I'm talking about Black women in career coaching, right? Like I know the dynamics that happen for us. I know what branding is. I know it from the other side of HR, like what that looks like on the other end. And so I have to understand, I have to kind of self-soothe myself in that and be like, you know what, girl, you do know what you're talking about. You have supported other people in this, right? And so I think it is doing it scared, but I think having the mindset around it to reframe beliefs and to self-soothe, right? And have coping pieces that allow you to kind of do it scared with some deadlines for yourself to help you move forward. So do it scared and provide you some insulation, warm hug, go get a glass of wine while you just post it, whatever's gonna calm down the nervous system and get you feeling more comfortable, and then click the send button and run away from the computer, the post, and run away.
I love that. And like celebrating yourself, right? And like acknowledging how difficult this can be. Because especially if we've been in toxic work environments where someone has been hypercritical of what we do, and then entrepreneurship requires you to just like, launch it out into the world, right? It can feel so scary. It can like be triggering because those traumas are coming up. So even like acknowledging that, giving yourself grace, compassion, and then, right, as Mercedes said, just launch it right out into the world and just see, right? Sometimes I know that I have to post something and then like not look at it for a day,
Oh
and
my
that's
gosh, yeah, don't
okay,
look at it.
right? To
Just let it go. Just
self-soothe.
walk away. Yes, absolutely. And you've
Yes.
done this before. You've done this before.
That's so
It's just for
important.
you now. Yeah.
Mhm. You've done this before. Yes, that's so important. I wanna ask common misconceptions about entrepreneurship, since we're on this
Oh
topic,
my goodness.
that people may have and what you have found in your experience as an entrepreneur and also working with clients who are pivoting into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I wanted to be as I'm looking at my notes because I wanted to be really specific about this because I think that like when I heard this question, the idea that the question prompts this idea of saying like, okay, well, here's how like here's all the wrong ways to launch a business, or here's you can't launch a business with this offer or this client or whatever. Like there's so many rules that we hear like as we're launching a business or as we have an online platform or whatever we do. And so I think there's a lot of misconceptions that there's a particular way that we have to do it, but I think that the thing that truly is one of the biggest lessons is that actually I feel like launching a business or making a shift or a change in your life, and launching a business is a big one, is more about your mindset and the identity that you have wrapped up in it. Um rather than the business itself, right?
Wow.
Because for me, it took me a long time actually at the beginning of this year to feel comfortable with me saying that I was somebody who was an influencer and a content creator, a creatorpreneur, even though I have always been creating content, right? And so because I wasn't comfortable with that identity, I was like really worried about like brand deals. Like, and I was really
Mm,
worried about like how my content looked and like how I presented myself. And all of those things created barriers for me creating the content that had nothing to do with the content itself. It was all in my mind and beliefs that I had about myself of like, well, I'm a coach and I'm an HR, professional. I'm a DI professional. Those are all the mindset and the identities that came with that mindset about who I was. So, what did it look like for me when I said, hey, I actually want to start doing more thought leadership? I actually want to start doing more lifestyle content. I actually want more brand deals. And I think for us, you know, a barrier to that is not whether we can do it or not, or whether like those things even fit in our business, right? Because I think that if we believe in it enough that it can happen, we'll find the intersection and the alignment between all of those things. But if we can't believe that that's something that we can have or we're worthy of or that is part of our identity, then sometimes we just don't pursue those things. So identity work comes at the forefront of most of what I do as a coach, and mindset, because once that's there, everything else is much easier, to manage and to flow. And that's my experience as well. Yeah.
so powerful. So powerful. Because you're so right. We do have all of this advice, right, that is thrown at
Mhm.
us, especially as new entrepreneurs, and having to sift through, right? Is this aligned with me? Do I want to go this way, this way?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Um, and so I love that you start with identity work, right? Who am I first? Because we were just talking backstage, like me being an introvert, if I have like strategy advice from an extrovert entrepreneur, it's not going to fit with me as a person,
Yes.
right? And so that's something that I have to kind of like filter through. And it's so important to know those pieces of yourself. And I just want to read a
Mhm.
comment too. Maria, thank you. Great points, ladies. Without clarity of dreams, goals, aspirations, self, offers, brand, will find it very difficult when we're making a move. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
It's so
Absolutely.
true. Yeah. Anything
Maria.
that you want to share around moving through that, becoming to like know yourself? Because we
Oh,
are socialized so often just to be workers within this
mhm.
system, right? It can be very difficult to be like, oh, I have an identity as a person outside of what I do. Maybe if someone's like new to that concept of identity work, anything that you can share around how you help your clients kind of understand these are the pieces of me, this is what I value, to then like
Yeah.
make this transition and it feel aligned.
Mhm. Yeah, so for me, it was starting with actually a script. And I think that doesn't always resonate with a lot of people, but I think it's a really actually a good tool and powerful tool that I think helps for most people, even if it doesn't get you all the way there. And so you can either do a life script. So a life script is kind of like at the end of you kind of say at the end of hey, at the end of my life, right? This is what I want to be able to say I accomplished and I did and I feel good and I feel proud about or what I experienced. So that's one option. But what I typically do is I actually write out my ideal day. I don't put guardrails on it. I don't say what's possible. I don't say what I can't have or whatever. I just literally write out what I would love my ideal perfect day to look like, right? And that helps me to provide myself with so much clarity and to not see the boundaries or the things that I think are hurdles in front of me right now. I get to dream a little bit. And so last year, yes, we should dream. But last year, I was actually in one of those moments where I actually didn't like coaching anymore. And it was actually really scary for me. And I was like, like, what am I gonna like? I'm a coach. I'm a
Mhm.
coach. Like freaking out. And so I had to like explore that. Like, why am I not liking coaching anymore? And I had realized at the time that like, so I'm back to feeling good about coaching. I left the
Okay.
coaching call right before I got on here, so I'm all energized, right? You see me. So it
Mhm.
wasn't that. It was actually that the vision was expanding, and because I was afraid of it expanding because of what I built, that I knew that there was safety in being a coach and not all of these other identities that I was kind of rejecting it and I was frustrated in the rejection. So then everything fell out of alignment because I was holding on to something that was an old vision and an old dream. And
Mhm.
so when I redid this visioning script that I really highly recommend, I started writing about going to training sessions and traveling the world and talking about my life and my lessons and trying to encourage people to see liberation as something that's different than what we have now, particularly in the workplace, right? We talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's already like triggering and like a wild thing to say. Like, so, and that's so far off from liberation. And so, what does it
Mhm.
mean to
Ooh.
actually instead say, I don't, I'm done with the DEI right now. I don't mean that I'm done with it in terms of it being a great tool for us, but I'm done with that
Mhm.
being the standard. I want it to be liberation. What does that really look like? And so then it became, well, I want to talk about that more. Well, how do I get comfortable with talking about like liberation more often? Like, how do I become a subject matter expert in liberation? Like, other than what I feel like is liberation, like, what's a practice that is embedded in that, and what does that look like in the workforce and for leaders and for corporate structures? And I was just like, oh, well, that's a huge vision and that's kind of scary. I'm going to put that down for just a second, freak out a little bit later. But if
Mhm.
I hadn't have done that life script, I wouldn't have connected with some of those things that I felt like I wanted, but that I wasn't exploring because I was in too much of the day to day of my business and really growing that and scaling that because I needed to replace my income, right?
Right.
And so being able to step away from that and actually do a script and get back in touch of like what is my heart's desires and what kind of makes the butterflies go and like feels a little scary, but like, right.
Mhm.
Those are the things that I think scripting allows for us. And then that script then became a new, let's call it 3.0 because we've been through a couple we've been through a couple versions right now of what Black woman bliss looks for me right now. Yes, to making liberation the standard. We
Mhm.
love it. And so that was kind of my journey of being able to reset that for myself, and different tools work for all of us, but that's something that I would say is a really great place to start if you've never done any scripting before. Yeah.
Ooh, thank you for that. I'm actually gonna do that. Have that on my list to do
Yeah.
now.
It's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can just see, like, the power of visioning, right? You kind
Yeah.
of set out, "This is the path that I'm going towards," and when we begin to see our energy as truly that powerful, that we can, like, bring stuff into being by envisioning it, the sky's the limit, right? There
It
are no
is.
limits to what we can do
Mm.
once we tap into that power. Ooh, I love that. Mercedes is going to be one of our incredible speakers at the upcoming Job Liberation Virtual Summit for Black Women coming up online May 1st to the 3rd. So I want to ask you if you have any teasers, things that you'd like to share around what your session will entail.
Yes. So I've talked about a lot about my journey and the lessons. And so I'm actually going to like be building us out a roadmap of what that looks like. Right. And so we've talked about, and it's so hard to kind of do it like right now, right. To talk about all of the different like decision points and the points in the road and like, like what are the sliding scales to really decide, what's the right direction to go? Is it going to be the career? Is it going to be the business? And how do I actually understand like where my skill set lies in that, right? And how I can actually make the most of it, right? Where we are really in that flow
Mhm.
state. And so I'm going to be talking more about like how that energy between career and business moves and how you can make the best of it so that you can really advance in it again in a way that isn't the greatest alignment for you, right? Because when I realized that connection between that energy for me, I was able to move in a more aligned career and a more aligned in business that allowed me to get closer to my long-term goals, right? Which was to exit and to do this full time. And so I'll be talking about that journey, the different sliding scales, the different decisions, and the connection with how you can create the most alignment between the two of them to move forward and pursue your dreams. So I'm so excited for
Ooh,
the conversation and more details and all of the things. Yeah.
I'm excited. I am so excited. And I'll say, like, as the planner, like, we get so excited for it to actually attend the sessions after all the planning
Uh-huh.
work is done, like the weekend of. We're there with our notebooks too, like taking
Uh-huh.
notes.
I'm gonna be there with my notebook, like,
Yeah.
those list of ladies, oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't y'all need to go ahead and sign up. You need to get one of these.
Yes, yes. I
Aw.
see one of our other incredible speakers, Jamila. I love scripting. It's truly an eye opener. It challenges me to find clarity.
Mhm.
Yeah. So back to what we talked about earlier too, like the power of clarity. When you are clear, this is the direction that I want to go. And this is like, as you said, where my energy, like the different buckets, and knowing that
Mm,
you have the power to determine that this is where this energy is going to go, this is where this energy is going to go, versus feeling like everyone gets your energy and you don't have any left over for yourself, right?
mhm.
Just that transformation is huge. Um, and so, yes, I want to ask, as we're winding down, if someone is afraid of making the wrong decision
Mm,
between entrepreneurship, again, you can do it part time too, or making a career pivot, and it's kind of keeping them feeling stuck or
mhm.
frozen. Anything that you can offer around giving yourself flexibility and the power to explore? Anything that you want to offer
Yeah.
around
Yeah. So one of the things that I have noticed, and we talked a little bit about it, of like this dynamic between like abundance and lack, right? And how that informs our decisions and what we choose to do with our time, our priorities, how we, flesh those out, how we actually spend our time, right? A lot of those things are based in those beliefs. They're based in the behaviors, the things that we think we can have or we cannot have. And so I think that it's hard to admit to ourselves sometimes when we made a decision that wasn't in alignment for whatever reason. And it's hard because then we feel like we're responsible for what came next, right? So just because we made a decision at the time in the job to take a certain job, it doesn't mean that we're at fault for the toxic leader and what happened after that, right? We can't blame
that?
ourselves, but we can understand like this is the decision or the mindset or the framework that resulted in me making that decision, right? So for me, I had been a person that had always had really great bosses. I had made sure I screened for the bosses. And when I made that career pivot with the most toxic supervisor, as I mentioned, there were flags that I had noticed, but I was like, this is literally the perfect opportunity. Like, when am I going to have this opportunity again? Like, I have to do it. It's right there, right? And in hindsight, I don't regret it. But I did see that flag, right? And it was hard for me to admit to myself that I had ignored that flag and made the decision
Mhm.
anyway. And it doesn't mean we necessarily even made like a decision that didn't benefit us long term, right? Because I think that the experience that I went through was very much needed for my growth and development. But when I look at it, like I made a decision out of lack, thinking like, well, this has to be the opportunity for me to move into management. Like, what else is going to be there, right? And that's actually a decision out of lack. So make sure that like you look back at your patterns, like the behaviors, the beliefs, the habits that you have around making decisions, and perhaps there is a pattern for what is leading you into the wrong direction. And we can't solve for everything, but we can see sometimes where there's a pattern of the things that we're doing and how it's not working out for our highest good. Yeah.
Ooh, ooh, that's so important. Noticing the patterns that may pop up, right? Ooh,
Mm.
that's bringing up a lot of different connections, because often it's not just in career, right? It's in our lives as a whole. When we start to see these different patterns, as we talked about before, like boundary setting, seeking worth externally, all these different things, once you're able to take that space to kind of reflect, which you can do at the summit, right, in a safe, confidential space, you're able to see those points of connection, right? And then that's
Mhm.
often where clarity comes too, like, oh, I was
Yeah.
operating this energy, this place, this place, this place. In
Uh-huh.
the things that I experienced were similar. Again, without shame, because we're all learning on this journey, but even to begin to recognize that can be so powerful in determining your path forward. Yeah.
I had,
Mhm.
so quickly, I had a conversation where I felt like I had grown and I had learned and I had, like, started to dismantle some beliefs, and I was in a therapy session and my therapist looked at me. She was actually the one who was like, "Yeah, I think you do have ADHD, girl." I was going through it. And she said to me, she's like, "Well, who told you that you had to be perfect?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Ma'am, I let go of perfectionism, like, years ago." And she's like, "Well, what you're telling me ain't lining up, girl." And I was like, so we all like we there are times where we think we've like moved through that pattern of behavior and it's just showing up in different ways and it's new opportunities to learn and grow. So you can always re-examine old behaviors through a new lens and see how it's showing up. So yeah,
Mhm.
always
So
opportunities.
important. I read a comment from Thorough Mickey Ray. Hello. I'll be at the summit, but I work on Sunday, so I'll have to catch that on replay. But I'm excited. Yes, I'm very excited. And there are replays available for the summit too. With the standard pass, you get a week of replays, premium pass, and Liberation Accountability Circle. You get replays for a year. So that is something to check out too. Our moderator, Prill, yes, says, yes, those patterns show up throughout your life in interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. And so what we're experiencing is often not just in our jobs and our careers, but in different relationships, right? As well. And you're able to see those points of clarity like, oh, this was not just in the workplace, but this was here, this was here. Family relationship, personal relationship. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And it's definitely going with you to the business. You don't leave those habits
Oh,
behind when you start the business. We need a whole nother
ooh,
session for that. We need a whole nother live for that.
truly, truly. Yes. As an entrepreneur, ooh, those patterns will pop up and you're the only one now, right? So it kind of forces you to be like, oh, I really need to examine this within myself, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
we often pick up these behaviors from other people throughout our lives and
Yeah.
then we recreate them with ourselves as
Yep.
entrepreneurs. So
Mhm.
mm, that is very real.
Mhm.
Jennifer says, absolutely, this just happened to me. I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glamazini, is this a safe space? I'm a red flag ignorer.
It's a safe space, but we will not normalize that. We love this.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, like same, right? And often these patterns are like so deeply rooted, which is why I talk about childhood trauma so often, where
Yeah.
we have to ignore different red flags and we're socialized to ignore them so often. And so
Mhm.
tapping back in to be like, oh, that was a red flag. That was a clear red flag that I can see now. But at the time, right, as you said, thinking this is the only thing that I'll ever have, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
like settle
Yeah.
for it,
Yeah.
right?
And then,
Um,
like, it's not even just,
mhm,
like, we're taught it, like, in childhood, and then you go into the workplace and, like, those same behaviors are just normalized. This is normal. And then
mhm.
you're, like, sitting here like, "Okay, this is normal. I guess I just better get on board with it." And, like, then you come out of that for whatever reason, you have a different experience, you go into full-time entrepreneurship, and you're like, "This isn't normal, actually." Like, everything in my body says this isn't normal, but it's what I've known, and, like, unpacking that and, like, deconstructing that is truly yeah, it's a big lesson, and it's hard.
It is. It is. Maria says these things get exposed quickly as an entrepreneur.
They're very
100%.
quick.
I think we need like a second conversation on that because they
Yeah, we might.
do.
They do, and it's a
Ooh.
little painful. It really is actually. It's really painful.
Uh-huh. It is.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Because that was something when I first started off, like I was recreating the patterns of toxicity, overworking
Mhm.
myself, everything I experienced in the job that I had exited. I was recreating as a business owner. I'm like, hold on. I didn't do all of that to make my exit strategy to get out, to recreate the same thing. But often, like, you have to envision something different and then you have to commit to seeing that come through. And it can be scary if you've never seen or you never experienced living a balanced life before where work
Mhm.
isn't the center. We're often having to create something like new, right? And that's where it can be helpful to be in community with other people who are on that journey to see that it is possible.
I
Yeah,
identify with that
yeah.
5,000%.
Cue that second conversation up.
We're
Thank
ready.
you. Yes. I want to ask as we're winding down, if those who feel aligned with your work, if they're looking to connect with you, maybe work with you as a client, how they can get in contact with you, book a call, and also follow you online on your various social media platforms.
Yes, absolutely. You can find me literally anywhere by typing in Mercedes Swan. So whether that's on
Mhm.
TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm on all of the things, almost every platform that Black women frequent. Not on Twitter anymore. Okay, we're not on Twitter anymore. But so I'm on all of those platforms, and I do have a commitment to accessibility as much as I can. So a lot of the work that I have created that I provide in, of course, one-on-one coaching. So I offer one-on-one coaching and coaching programs and packages, but I recognize that I do want that to be accessible for Black women. And that is why I founded the Black Women Bliss community. So it provides a safe communal space for Black women to come together, to talk about our challenges, to get the support. So it has group coaching, and implementation sessions where we meet, and an entire training portal with much more detail of all of the things that I've talked about today. So, getting clear on your direction, defining what your Black Woman Bliss era is, going down your path of saying, hey, I'm going into career or business. And then I actually have two tracks in that where you can either go through a career pivot or a business pivot. And then there's, of course, some more resources about growth development. So, financial planning, exit planning, all of those things in the platform. So, it's kind of like having going through a coaching program, self driven, and it's all in the community, but you still get the space and insulation to be in community with other Black women who are doing the same. And of course, me in that space with group coaching as well. So, yeah.
That's
So
incredible. That's
that's available
incredible.
on my website.
Wonderful. And did I see on LinkedIn you're doing like a directory of
Yes.
workplaces?
Yes.
I
So I
thought that
have,
was
oh my
amazing.
gosh. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, there's
Um,
so I have a, oh my gosh, I think I have more than 60 on there now. Don't quote me on that. But there are 60 employers that are self-reported by Black women for places where they felt like they've experienced a safe workplace. And so my goal is, every once in a while I re-promote that and share that. So it's a resource for Black women who, if they are looking for a career pivot, to kind of start there. I know that there's so much more work to that. So I have lots of plans for later in the year for really creating a list of liberatory workplaces based on more of a framework and self-reporting and all of those things. So I'm really excited for that to launch later this year. But yes, I do have a database and resources. I also have a journal to help Black women kind of talk through and think through their next career change and things like that. And I also have a 9 to 5 exit strategy workbook. So there's lots of things. You can go to my website, find what works best for you. But yeah. So when you're talking about that overworking thing, I have to say, girl, sit down. Don't you create one more. Don't you create one more thing. Sit down. But yeah, there's lots of resources if you need career business
mhm.
development specifically culturally relevant for Black women. We didn't even talk about the AI tool that I made. So it's just a lot. So she's in the community. We won't talk about it, but all of it's on my website. If you need literally resources that are created for us, trauma informed, culturally
Mhm,
responsive to us. It's all
mhm.
there.
Incredible. Incredible. So thank you, Mercedes. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you
me
for
for this
having
incredible
me.
conversation. Again, Mercedes is one of our amazing summit speakers coming up. And the summit is happening online May 1st to the 3rd. You can register now. The link is scrolling on the screen, also in the description section. We have 28 incredible, amazing, outstanding Black women speakers coming to share our knowledge, our expertise to help us develop our strategy during this time of immense uncertainty and to know that you have options, right? If you do decide to pursue entrepreneurship, we have Celeste coming in to talk about contract work. We have an investment retirement panel. We have healing from workplace trauma panel. All these Black women, incredible Black women experts coming in to share our knowledge, lived experience in a safe setting. So no attendees will be on camera. You'll also have the option to change your name within the Summit platform. So please register to join us. And on that note, you are so welcome. Thank you,
Thank
Prill, our Summit
you.
moderator. Thank you for being here. Thank you. This is amazing. Glamzini says, thank you. I'll go back to watch the beginning that I
Oh,
missed. Absolutely. And
joy.
on that note, thank y'all so much for being here, for being in the chat. If you're watching the replay, thank you. And yeah, until next time, y'all, I will be live on Thursday with Lauren, one of our incredible summit speakers too. So look out for that. But until then, bye,
Yay.
y'all. Thank you so much. And thank you,
Bye.
Mercedes.
Thank you, Marissa. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.